Let's pray. God, we thank you for your son, for the way he lived, for the way he loved, for the way he taught us that we always have the choice to care for others, to help those around us, and to show your peace and love. Help us, O Lord, to be like Jesus. Inspire us this morning through your word. Amen. The Goblin Emperor tells the story of Maya, an 18-year-old half-elf, half-goblin, who becomes emperor when his father and his three older brothers unexpectedly die when their airship is wrecked. The novel is a story of race and patriarchy, power and politics. And it is one of the most quintessential Hopepunk novels of our day. I recommend it. It's a political novel, but it's not. It's really the story of the first year of Maya's reign and all the chaos and drama that ensues. You see, Maya didn't have the typical royal upbringing. To say that he had a rough childhood is an understatement. Maya only met his father, the emperor, one time, when he was 8 at his mother's funeral. The emperor hated his wife and hated Maya. He only married Maya's mother for political reasons, to foster peace with the goblins. When the emperor realizes that the empress is pregnant, he banishes her to a secluded mansion to raise their son, who he never wanted, all alone. Maya's mother died when Maya was 8. So the emperor sends a cousin that he also doesn't like to raise his son. This cousin had no interest or business in being a caretaker. Not only was he a poor teacher who taught Maya little about being royalty, he was mean and cruel. You almost expect the Goblin Emperor to be a grimdark story about Maya the tyrant, the one who uses his power to seek vengeance for all those who wronged him, all the wrongs that he had absolutely no power to do anything about before he became emperor. But that is not this book. The Goblin Emperor is a story about Maya's quest to always be the opposite of his father, to be kind and empathetic, to rule with kindness and to not hoard power or use others to further his reign. The Goblin Emperor is a remarkable tale of someone trying to remain themselves, loving, honest, caring, no matter the horrors that life brings, even when what is expected from them is to advance their great power at the expense of anyone or anything else. I love the Goblin Emperor because it's a reminder to me that compassion, that gentleness and inclusion are always a choice, no matter the pressures of life, no matter when life is most dark. In the book, Maya always makes time for others, even when he is encouraged not to. When his father's airship goes down, killing everyone on board, Maya attends the memorial service for all the emperor's servants when no one else even thought about them. He makes time every week to have a meal with his father's first wife, who was banished when she failed to give the emperor an heir. For Maya knew that this banishment was unjust, just like how the emperor treated his mother. When a powerful ruler from within the kingdom seeks to marry Maya's half-sister, who he never knew, Maya refuses to marry off his sister for political gain, even though that was what was expected. Throughout the entire book, Maya is kind, honoring, and dignifying to women. So much so that for the first time, a woman, Kiru, seeks to be part of the emperor's royal guard. When Maya asks Kiru why she wants this position, she says, "We were passed over initially, For the old emperor never would have countenanced such a thing. But we heard of your kindness to the emperor's first wife and to your half-sister, and we dared to hope. And Maya accepts. Much of the book centers around two failed coups during Maya's first few months as emperor. The powers that be, they didn't like that Maya was an outsider, that he was half goblin. They also really didn't like that Maya did not play by the established rules, which not only benefited the emperor, but also them. They were appalled that Maya, in the language of Jesus, sought to bring healing to the sick and not the healthy. I don't want to spoil too much of the book, but the first coup, it involves one of Maya's own imperial guards, the one that Kiru ends up replacing. For assisting in this coup, Maya's personal guard was to be executed, and there was nothing that Maya could do about this, even if he wanted. However, according to tradition, Maya had the chance to see this guard one last time before he was killed, and Maya did. Maya wanted to know why this happened. He wanted to understand why the guard did what they did. At the end of the conversation, this guard, Dazis, asked Maya to stay with him and be present while he is executed. No one expected Maya to say yes. Maya owed absolutely nothing to this guard, but Maya says, yes, we will stay. There's about 2 hours before the execution that Maya has to wait, and so he spends much of that time in contemplation and prayer. It's a very Garden of Gethsemane moment, even if Maya is not the one that's going to be killed. Here Maya prays that this horrible situation, that it would not change him, that this plot to take his life, to usurp his power, that it would not make him numb. He prays this: let my anger die with him. Let us both be freed from the burden of his action. Help me not to feel hatred. There is so much about Maya's life that helps me see Jesus. Jesus always made space for others, always gave parts of himself away to help others, to talk to others, even when it defied society's norms. He didn't care if it surprised or shocked people. If it was the right thing to do, it was worth doing. You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? The woman at the well says to Jesus in John 4. Like Maya, Jesus was never afraid to confront the patriarchy of his day. He honored women. He showed them dignity and respect. He entrusted them to be the first preachers of the resurrection. And he always made space for the outcast, like in our story for today. It's 2 days before he's to be arrested, as Don said, and here he is enjoying a meal in the house of a leper, in the house of someone who society said was unclean and unfit. Jesus always saw people as people, never as tools to be used for his benefit, for his mission, for the advancement of his kingdom. He would always choose to abandon his mission to help others, rather than turn anyone into his pawn. Jesus wouldn't stop people from making bad choices, even if it meant them betraying him, because he honored their ability to choose. And Jesus gave people more chances than they deserved and told us as his followers to do likewise. How many times must we forgive? 7 times? No, 70 times 7, Jesus says. One of my favorite stories of the gentleness of Jesus and his compassion is when Jesus encounters a demon-possessed man in Gerasene. Jesus approaches this man who is living in the tombs, this man who hurts himself because he has internalized all the hatred and all the fear that everyone in his society has for him. Jesus could have avoided him. He had no reason to go to those tombs and make space for this man. But Jesus does so because he longs for everyone's liberation. When he approaches, he asks one question, and it's not, how can I help? Or even, why do you have a demon? He asks, what is your name? Jesus understands that he is a person too. And he lets this individual know that he sees them. When no one else sees him as a human, Jesus treats him gently, as someone who deserves honor and respect. And then he helps this man no longer live among the tombs. He calls him out and helps him find a place in society again. There's a scene in The Goblin Emperor, which I love. It's a minor scene, a few pages about the emperor's 19th birthday. Maya wakes up early that day. He makes his way to the dining room, and when he does, he finds all of his servants opening up his birthday gifts and writing out all the thank you notes. Maya asks, who are all these gifts from? A number of them are from the expected sources. Foreign rulers, members of the parliament, the wealthy that are looking for future favors. Those were to be expected. But many of the presents, they came from unlikely sources. From the people who Maya showed kindness to when he didn't have to, like the families of the crew of the airship. After seeing all these gifts from all these people that weren't expected to give him gifts, Maya asks, why? He says he doesn't understand. What do they want? He assumes they want something. The secretary of his responds, they merely want you to have a happy birthday. In other words, they want to show you kindness because of the kindness that you showed them. Kindness generates more kindness. The gifts given to Maya help me imagine why the woman in this story anoints Jesus with such an extravagant gift right on his head at the end of his life. It is her way of giving thanks for Jesus's kindness and the life he lived. It was her way of recognizing the way that Jesus made space for people in his society like her, who were typically overlooked, forgotten, and silenced. It was her way of just saying thank you. If this really is the end, Jesus, we appreciate you. You have touched our lives in a way that money and goods never can, with your presence, with your love. This woman, like many in The Goblin Emperor, performs this gesture with no expectation of reciprocity. And the disciples, much like Maya, they struggle to know what to do with such a beautiful act. When Christians look at the life of Jesus, we are tempted to look at it through either the grimdark or the noble bright lens. On one hand, there is the blame and shame gospel, the grimdark gospel that centers on sin and God's judgment. This gospel sees humans as bad, as evil, so evil that God had to punish us forever. That is, until Jesus paid the price on the cross, until Jesus satisfied God's wrath, until Jesus took upon himself all the sin, all the evil, so that we could be clean. I don't appreciate this understanding very much. I don't think you can if you believe in a nonviolent God. It also doesn't care much about the life of Jesus, nor even the world we live in. But we all know this view is very prevalent among many today. And the way that it remains so powerful is by using grimdark strategies and tactics like preying on our fears and making us afraid. On the other side of the spectrum, there's a theology of Jesus' life and death, which I gravitated to personally over many of the years. It's called Christus Victor. I even wrote a hymn about it in seminary to counterbalance the grimdark teachings and understandings of Jesus. Christus Victor believes that during Jesus' life and on the cross, there was a cosmic battle between good and evil, that Jesus came to combat the powers and principalities, And that while it appeared for a few days that these powers had won, that during the resurrection, God proved once and for all that God was stronger, that love wins, that goodness overcomes, that death has been defeated, that all shall be well in all matters of things, all shall be well. There's still a lot to like for me about Christus Victor, but I can't help but think that this sounds a little bit too noble bright. There's a sense that at the last minute that things are going to work out, that redemption will happen. Christ the victor, it's a little too triumphant for me. Like the grimdark understanding of Jesus, Christ the victor can take away all of our agency. If God has already conquered death, why worry about the forces of death among us? If God has already triumphed, then why do our lives matter? Brian Blount, a great Presbyterian preacher and a previous president at Union Seminary, wrote a book a few years ago called Invasion of the Dead. In the book, he looks at a bunch of the post-apocalyptic stories of our day and asks what they might teach us about Jesus' life and resurrection. And here is how he pictures Jesus' journey to the cross. I imagine a despondent Jesus declaring with conviction, I will die soon for what I believe, because of how I have lived and how I promise to keep on living. What I believe and how I live are in conflict with the powers of this world and how they continue to force others to live. If you follow me and my beliefs, you will be in conflict with those powers too. You may well die too. But I know no other way to flash God's future back into the present. I am sorry. I am so very sorry, but I do not see another way. This is very different from a triumphalistic, victorious understanding of Jesus, is it not? What might a more Hopepunk understanding of the gospel look like? To me, it comes down to two things, and these two things aren't new. God's commitment to being with and God's commitment to beauty. God didn't come primarily to save us, to triumph, to win. God came because God's deepest desire is to be beside us. And beside us, not just in times of joy and celebration, but beside us, especially in times of horror, agony, isolation, and abandonment. Through Jesus' life and through his death, Jesus places himself at the mercy of the powers. He becomes naked, humiliated, helpless, to show us once and for all that no matter what we do, that God will always be beside us, saying that you are my friend, and there is nowhere else in the world that I'd rather be but right here beside you. But God didn't just come to be with. God also came to show us how to live a beautiful life. The life that we were created by God to embody. The life that we can have if we dare want it. Jesus' whole life was an obedience response to love. He gave up everything for the sake of creating space for love, a space in this world where love can flow, where people can be bound together by giving and receiving love. And his life was unlike anything the world had ever encountered before or since. It was so beautiful that it threatened us. So we trampled all over God's beauty. We went out of our way to humiliate and make God's beauty unsightly. But not even our worst could stop God's beauty from erupting. For even when we betrayed God, even when we displayed just how ugly that we can be, the resurrection is God's way of bringing our worst betrayals back into God's story and to make us once again part of God's beautiful life. The gospel of Jesus reminds us that often life will go wrong. Often life will be bleak. Often we will fail. Often things will not go our way. Sometimes life might leave us battered and bruised, just like it did to Jesus. Yet somehow, some way, God will always find a way to bring redemption from out of our brokenness. God will find a way to turn our despondency into sunflowers, our destruction into glory, our tombs into gardens that forever display God's life.